It's 3 a.m. You're in a helium headspace. It's Monday, September 29th, 2025. The film In Country premiered on this day in 1989, directed by Norman Jewison. Starring Bruce Willis, Emily Lloyd, Joan Allen, Kevin Anderson, John Terry, Stephen Tobolowsky, and Daniel Jenkins, who, as Dwayne, ponders aloud, "When I get back to the world, this will be a dream. But now, the world is a dream." It made $3.6 million its opening weekend and has since accumulated $9.3 million. It's the birthday of the man who said life is not what is supposed to be, it's what it is. The way you cope with it is what makes the difference. That man was director Michelangelo Antonioni, who was born in Ferrara, Italy in 1912. And over the course of the 20th century, he became one of cinema's most distinct voices. He was not a director who filled the screen with action or dramatic resolutions. Instead, he turned his lens toward the silences, the alienation, and the quiet disconnections of modern life. His films, like La Ventura, La Notte, and Blow Up, asked audiences to sit in the ambiguity, to consider what was unsaid as much as what was shown. Antonioni resisted the easy comforts of traditional storytelling, preferring to explore how people drift apart, even in the midst of progress. For those who were patient with him, his work opened a new dimension of film, one where mood and perception carried as much weight as plot. He was not a moralist, but rather an observer who held a mirror to the strange, sometimes disquieting reality of the modern world. The director Stanley Kramer was also born on this day, but in 1913 in New York City. And over the course of the 20th century, he made a name for himself as one of Hollywood's most unflinching filmmakers. He wasn't the type to chase easy box office victories. He chased subjects that unsettled people, that made them think, and sometimes made them squirm. In a town built on escapism, Kramer put racial prejudice, nuclear war, courtroom justice, and the world's hypocrisies right up on the screen. Films like Judgment at Nuremberg, The Defiant Ones, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner weren't designed for comfort, they were designed for confrontation. Yet he also had room for spectacle and comedy. It's a mad, 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 mad world proved he wasn't above letting audiences laugh. Kramer's legacy isn't perfection, but persistence. The steady belief that movies could matter beyond their runtime. That they could stir conversation in the lobby long after the credits rolled. Stanley Kramer, who said, "A film should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed." Another director, Robert Benton, was born today in 1932 in Waxahachie, Texas, and grew into one of the quieter but unmistakable forces in American cinema. His name is often tied to films that balanced popular appeal with literary sensitivity, a rare thing in Hollywood. Benton first made his mark as a co-writer of Bonnie and Clyde, the Arthur Penn film that turned a bloody Depression-era crime spree into a touchstone of the new Hollywood movement. Later, he both wrote and directed Kramer vs. Kramer, a film that placed the strains of divorce and fatherhood squarely at the center of mainstream American conversation. That film won him 3 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Benton's career straddles the commercial and the personal, and while his style never announced itself with fireworks, it did leave a steady imprint. Stories rooted in character, pain, and reconciliation, rather than spectacle. Today in 1901 marks the day when Giuseppe Lanza del Vasto entered the world, an Italian poet-philosopher who took a long look at the previous century's violence and decided to live otherwise. After a pilgrimage to India, he met Gandhi, who nicknamed him Deshantidus, which meant servant of peace, and came home with a manual for the spirit and the hands. His book, Return to the Source. He put the ideas in his book to work by founding the Community of the Arc in France, a Gandhian experiment in shared labor, craftsmanship, song, and nonviolent action that later stood alongside farmers in their struggles against the French government. The point wasn't to posture, it was to prove that a plain, disciplined life could be freer than the life of power. If you're listening for a single thread in his story, it's this. He tried to make peace practical, visible, and contagious. Giuseppe Del Vasto, who said, "The most efficient action, the most significant testimony to nonviolence is living a life in which there is no violence, showing that such a life is possible." Toward the opposite end of the philosophical spectrum, Andrew Dice Clay was born today in 1957 in Brooklyn, New York, and went on to become one of the most controversial and recognizable stand-up comics of the 1980s. At a time when most comedians were happy to fill clubs, Clay filled entire arenas, cultivating his swaggering alter ego, the Dice Man. His style was brash, confrontational, and laced with deliberately shocking nursery rhyme parodies that turned him both into a cultural lightning rod and an unlikely superstar. Whether one loved him or loathed him, his act spoke to the excesses of America, loud, unapologetic, and unapologetically divisive. He later carved out a steady career in television and film, proving that even the most outrageous stage personas can mask a craftsman who knows how to work a room and leave an audience talking long after the lights go down. Today in 1864, in the Basque city of Bilbao, Miguel de Unamuno was born, a man who would wrestle his entire life with the tension between faith and doubt, reason and longing. He belonged to what is called Spain's Generation of 98, a group of writers and thinkers who sought to make sense of a nation reeling from decline and defeat. Unamuno's voice stood apart, though, because he pressed into the very marrow of existence. Why do we live? Why do we suffer? Why must we die? His best-known work, The Tragic Sense of Life, captured his conviction that true humanity is found not in certainty, but in the struggle itself, struggling with God, with mortality, with the hunger for meaning. He was not a detached academic, he was a man who felt the ache of questions as though they were wounds, and he asked his readers to feel them too. Miguel de Unamuno, who said, "To fall into a habit is to begin to cease to be." Moving again toward the opposite end of thought, in 1934, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi came into the world in Fuma, Italy, which today is called Rijeka, Croatia. He grew up and later gave us the idea of flow, the name for those rare stretches when work stops feeling like work and time slips its leash. He watched painters forget meals, chess players forget the clock, climbers forget the ground, and he built a framework from that rapture. Clear goals, immediate feedback, and a sweet spot where skill and challenge meet. Flow isn't about blissed-out daydreaming, it's focused effort that leaves you more capable than before. He argued that attention is our scarcest resource, that meaning is made, not found, and that a life improves when we can steer our mind on purpose, at school, on the job, in sport, and at the kitchen table. No halos here, just habits. Shape goals, match difficulty to ability, shut out the noise, and do the thing for its own sake. That's not worship, that's a workable way to live. He said, "Control of consciousness determines the quality of life." It's the anniversary of the birth of the man who said, "My words will outlast their swords, though my body cannot." In the year 440, a man named Pamprepius was born in Panopolis, Egypt, what is now known as Akim. He came of age in a world where Christianity was tightening its grip on the Byzantine Empire, yet he clung to the old gods and the old ways. Pamprepius was both a philosopher and a poet, steeped in classical tradition, but history remembers him less for his writings than for his politics. He attached himself to Ilus, a powerful general who eventually rebelled against the Emperor Zeno. Pamprepius's learning and charisma earned him a place in the inner circle of that revolt, and his devotion to pagan ideals gave him a reputation as one of the last defenders of the fading religion. His life ended violently after the rebellion failed, a reminder of how ideas and ambition often collided in that turbulent age. He was, in short, a man out of step with his time, brilliant, bold, and doomed. Pamprepius, who said the language of Homer is more eternal than the decrees of emperors. Hillel Furstenberg was born today in 1935 in Berlin into a Jewish family that fled Nazi Germany and eventually settled in the United States. From those unsettled beginnings, he went on to become one of the most influential mathematicians of the 20th century. Furstenberg helped create entire new fields, particularly in ergodic theory, the study of long-term behavior in dynamic systems, and in random walks where seemingly aimless steps reveal deep structures in probability and number theory. His methods brought together pure mathematics and unexpected applications, linking areas once thought distant. In 2020, he was awarded the Abel Prize, often considered the equivalent of a Nobel in mathematics, a recognition not of a single flash of brilliance, but of a lifetime of work that reshaped how mathematicians see patterns in randomness and order in chaos. And those are some of the things we humans have done over the years. Do the useful thing, say the courageous thing, contemplate the beautiful thing. That is enough. Please follow, like, and subscribe.